Hey there! Before we start the podcast, I need you to put down that wavebird and listen up.
I need money.
For a tenth of what the price of that wireless GameCube controller costs,
That should be like $5 if you got it off Shop Goodwill.
you can support me here at the podcast of Two Consoles Too Late.
I need to buy more games.
Your support gets bonus content like additional episodes, Discord server access, typewriter manifestos, and personal shoutouts on the airwaves.
I actually have a typewriter.
Vote on Patreon polls to see what video game I talk about next.
Nothing on Atari 2600.
So go to patreon.com/2consoles2late because what the world needs is more Stick It!
Hi, everybody.
Maybe what they're seeing and how they're seeing it, and also video games. I'm hearing more and more people say the level of violence on video games is really shaping young people's thoughts.
And constant crises have shaken the entire world and have threatened in each case to bring on the gigantic conflict which is today, unhappily, a fact.
9 programmable weapons buttons. Customizable feedback software. Don't just buy a new video game. Make one.
He doesn't have a PlayStation 5.
That's because he's Two Consoles Too Late.
Hello, and welcome to the Two Consoles Too Late podcast. I am the host, Jackson Keebler, and I am Two Consoles Too Late. I am back from the Oaks, PA. I am back from the Geekdom Con, and here is my audio of my panel on retro video games and podcasting. But before I get into that, I got a little bit of Stick It, which is directly related to my panel. And over on Auctionware, we're going to take a look at some SNES games that went for a pretty penny, but not on the Shop Goodwills. It's going to be a lot of fun. Let's go. So one of my favorite films of all time is the 1974 classic The Conversation, directed by Francis Ford Coppola. Now, why am I bringing up this film? Number one, it's an awesome movie, and if you haven't seen it, you should see it. It came out just after the first Godfather. It features Gene Hackman, rest in peace, John Cazale, who played Fredo in The Godfather, Harrison Ford, Cindy Williams plays the plotting wife. Anyway, the reason this movie came to mind is because at the beginning of the film, Gene Hackman, who plays Harry Call, the surveillance expert, he records a conversation, and to get a better recording of the conversation, he has to wash it through some devices. And it's just done wonderfully, and I just cannot recommend that movie enough. But that's what's bringing me to Stick It, is this movie was on my brain because now I went to the Geekdom Con, and now I have to take my recording and wash it out to get a better recording. So here we go with Stick It.
Stick It!
All right, so before I get into Stick It, I have to set up the context, don't I? Can't just go running around saying Stick It. So we're going to go over to the Oxford Learner's Dictionary and see what the definition of a room is, all right? Just to establish that a room has certain parameters that must be met. The definition of a room is a part of a building that has its own walls, floor, and ceiling, and is used for a particular purpose. So let's put the word room into a sentence. All right? Learning is fun here at Two Consoles Too Late. So let's put that into a sentence. Jackson, your panel will be in panel room B. So when I hear that statement, I think, okay, my panel will be in a part of a building that has its own walls, floor, and ceiling, and will be used for the particular purpose of panels. Okay. Unfortunately, what I found is that the Geekdom Con's idea of a room is not a room. It was a space. It was a space of I don't know, 100 square feet with about 30 fold-out chairs, a table, a TV, a speaker, and divided by 2 curtains. And the division created by these curtains was panel room A and panel room C. These were not rooms, they were spaces, and it was very frustrating. Actually, I had to stop the recording because I was just getting pissed off and just felt like I was ranting. I am still so pissed about this. It's ridiculous. Anyway, so let's give this some context, all right? So I get to the Geekdom Con, and my panel is not being held in a room, but a space that is very loud, and all the noise from the arcades bleeding in, and the noise from the adjacent panel, quote-unquote, rooms is bleeding in. So I'm just kind of like, okay, I'm just going to overcome this obstacle, and I'm just going to make the best of this. So I go to find the bathroom, and there's an area for tabletop gaming. And the tabletop gaming is taking place in a well-lit, air-conditioned room. An actual room. You could hear a fucking pin drop in that room. It was so quiet, and people, and it was, I guess, well attended, but tabletop gaming got its own room, and panels just got this space where it was just loud as fuck. Anyway, so that all being said, when you listen to the audio of my panel, it's not good, and I tried washing it out the best I could, but it is what it is. So to thy Geekdom Con, if you're going to have panel rooms, make sure that they're rooms. So, the Geekdom Con, you can go ahead and
Stick it!
So, it'd been a while since I'd been to Oaks, PA. The last time I was in Oaks, PA, I was at Too Many Games. I actually have a video on my YouTube at 2 Consoles Too Late of when I was at Too Many Games. And being back there, I kind of thought, you know what? I might give Too Many Games a second chance. But just something about when I get to these conventions, I don't know, I sort of like mentally check out. I just don't feel like I'm getting like the full experience. Like going to all the panels, and like when it comes to like celebrities, I really don't give a shit. When I was at Too Many Games, I met Pat Contry, and I had him, for some reason, I had him sign my mini NES, and the signature is completely faded and gone now. So it was like, what was the point? I just don't go for that sort of like quote unquote celebrity culture. Now, if I was on the other end of it and I was charging $40 for a selfie and an autograph, I'd be all about it, right? So there you go. So anyway, not a lot of video game vendors. There was a little small arcade area. I did not partake of the video games, and I do not tabletop game, although if I did, there would have been a really comfortable room that was well lit and air conditioned, and I could hear myself think. Okay, I just gotta let this go, all right? I just gotta let it go. So anyway, without further ado, here is my panel from the Geekdom Con on retro video games and podcasting. Please excuse the noise, but enjoy. All right, I'm going to get started. A little early, sorry. My name is Jackson Keebler, and I am 2 Consoles Too Late. And I have a podcast on retro video games and podcasting. And I did this panel before. I was telling these guys, sorry about the noise. Anyway, I did this panel in Chicago, and I'm just going to keep it fast and loose. All right, so if you got a question, I'm probably not going to be able to hear you. Just raise your hand, come up here, and we'll get you in. All right, so let's just go. I don't do a video podcast, so I can do this. I do have some merch. That is the Miracle of Save States Magnet. And the joke is that I play a lot of video games on mini consoles with save states, and I can't get through a lot of these games without the save states. So I just called it the Miracle of Save States, and I had these fridge magnets made, and they're a little blasphemous, but they are for sale if you want them. Can anyone hear me? Kinda? Thank you. Now I'm having technical difficulties on my end. Anyway, so I did this panel in Chicago. This is Walter Day. Does anyone know who Walter Day is? Okay. If you ever heard about Billy Mitchell and the Donkey Kong thing, this guy's pretty prominent. Really nice guy. I was really surprised he was even there and I got to meet him. So that's my claim to fame, that I got to meet Walter Day in Chicago doing this same panel. I read the book by Reggie Fils-Aimé, the former COO of Nintendo. And he said when you give a presentation, to be engaging. I don't think he ever gave a presentation with like something going on next door, but I'm trying to follow his example, so bear with me, right? Come on, load. Anyway, this is my family, that's my wife and my son. We are from Baltimore. Woo! Baltimore, the Orioles are doing horrible right now. We know all about it. We are in the middle of a rebuild that failed. So yes, I'm from Baltimore. If you read the bio and guidebook, I live with my family and, sorry about the load times, my 2 cats. Apparently a presentation is better when you put cats in it, so I put my cats in there. The gray one's Domino, and the little one on the floor, that is Olive. So they're my 2 biggest fans. So anyway, so I grew up a kid like anyone. I'm 45 years old, so I grew up in the 80s as Nintendo was breaking out and all that. And so I was a kid, you know, the typical wake up on Christmas morning, you know, and there's the new video game system. Well, actually, I didn't have a Nintendo. I did have a Game Boy, but I didn't have a Nintendo. I was the kid, like, who had the friend who had every game, and you went to his house after school, and it was like, oh my God, I got the Power Glove. You got to see this thing. Yeah, so I never had a Nintendo. I went to my friends' houses to play Nintendo, but I did have a Game Boy growing up. So this is my family. The reason I'm showing this is because we've all grown up, but we're all creative sorts, and so when I'm talking about a podcast, I wanted a creative project. And I was in a band for a while. I was never very good. I played drums. So music wasn't my thing, but I always needed a creative outlet. So just before COVID hit, I got into retro video games and I started listening to podcasts. And I started listening to retro video game podcasts. Does anyone here listen to retro video game, like podcasts in general? Does anyone listen to podcasts? Okay. I'll be curious to know what they are. Come up and tell me later. So anyway, I started this podcast and I started listening to like the CU podcast with Pat Contry and a couple others, and I thought, you know what, I could do this. You know, it's pretty easy, right? Well, that's what I thought. I thought I'm just gonna hit the record button and that's it, you know, like I'm going to talk about these video games and I'm going to make all this money, which is not the case. Sorry again. I don't consider myself a content creator. To be a content creator, you have to make money from the content that you're creating. And I don't make any money from my podcast. I'll tell you that right now. I would like to make money, don't get me wrong. That would be wonderful. Wake up, play some video games, and then just talk about them, right? It's not that easy. Not that easy. So anyway, this might take a while to load. I'm not sure if it's gonna load. So pre-COVID, my wife's cousin comes over with an SNES Classic, and on there is Super Metroid. Has anyone ever not played Super Metroid? It's okay. It's a great game, and I loved it as a kid, but to come back and play it as an adult was like, I was hooked again. I was like, oh, this is so fun. I'm 16 again. No. So I started playing Super Metroid, and I'm a completionist. I'm like, well, I gotta play all the other Metroid games that were ever made. So I get Metroid 2, Metroid Fusion, Metroid, all the Metroids, Metroid Prime, Metroid Other M. I played them all, and I loved all of them. So meanwhile, while this is going on, I'm like, all right, well, I'm gonna do this podcast about, my experience with these retro video games. Now, then COVID hits, and COVID just really kind of brought a lot of people into the fold of retro video games because we're all stuck in our houses, we have nothing to do, we just blew the dust off our Wii, said, okay, I'll play Mario Galaxy again, or whatever game you had. And then next thing we know, we're like, oh, I'm gonna buy a copy of, I don't know, Super Castlevania or something. And then you went on eBay, I was like, wait a minute, why is this game $40? And then it was like, wait a minute, this game's 60, and the prices just went up. So like all these people came into retro video games. Well, I was never into retro video games before all this. So the title 2 Consoles Too Late is kind of a joke because I'm like, I don't have modern consoles. I do have a PS4 now. But before that, I didn't have a modern console. My newest console was a PS3. And every time I sat down to play a new game, I just couldn't. I stopped at Force Unleashed on the PS3 because I love Star Wars, I love the video games. All right, Lady Gaga. Anyway, so I started playing Force Unleashed, but I couldn't do like the combos to like defeat the bosses. I was like, forget this, I'm not doing this. New video games can't do it. So I was like, I much prefer the old video games, and that's just where I'm at. I got a PS4 just last year, and I tried Fallout 4, Death Stranding, Days Gone, Star Wars Squadrons, and I just couldn't do it. I was like, when I put in Star Wars Squadrons, I'm like, this isn't X-Wing versus TIE Fighter. Isn't it supposed to be like that? Because that was a great game. So that's where I come with the modern versus retro video games. So anyway, I'm doing a podcast, right? So I start this podcast and I'm like, oh, this will be easy, right? I'm just gonna record and talk about video games. And I had no idea what I was doing. This is my basement, and I bought 2 microphones because I thought, okay, I'm gonna have a co-host and they're gonna sit right next to me when I talk about these video games. That is not the case. I couldn't find a co-host. I'm still looking for a co-host because my experience is when you listen to any sort of, whether it be a podcast or a YouTube video, there has to be a dialogue. And so for the 138 episodes so far of 2 Consoles Too Late, it's been mostly me. And that's a little difficult because you want to have a dialogue. You want to have, oh yeah, I remember getting this when I was 16. You want to have some semblance of just someone talking. So that's been like one of the biggest obstacles to my podcast has been, just being the single talking head. So as I'm starting this podcast, I'm like, oh, I have to get one of those cool little icons that pops up in Apple Podcasts, right? So this is my first podcast icon. It doesn't say anything about video games. It's hard to read. It's really hard to see that says 2 consoles too late. And it's just some weird picture of me as a kid. So I went to a podcast coach, and she was just like, all right, well, that just sucks. Like just throw that out. That's just cool. You knew how to use Photoshop, but that doesn't say that you know how to play video games. And I don't even know that says 2 consoles too late. So I changed it. Now it's 2 consoles too late. There's a Nintendo controller and a little thing about what the podcast is about. Pure and simple. I was overthinking the process. So that was just like one example of how I was just kind of screwing up starting a podcast. But as the podcast went on, episode 1 was not episode 10, and episode 10 was not episode 25. The podcast became very organic in what I wanted to do with it. I always knew when I started the podcast that my episode length, I did not want to be longer than a half an hour. That was like the first thing I said. I said, I listened to this it's a great podcast. It's called Collector's Quest. And these guys talk for 2 to 3 hours about collecting video games. And they are a font of knowledge. I mean, anything when it comes to collecting video games, these guys know it down to the inserts, whatever. But they talk for 3 hours. That's a lot. I mean, and what podcasts are companion mediums, right? You do your laundry, you listen to a podcast. You drive to work, you listen to a podcast. It's something that's happening while you're doing something. There's not a lot of active listening to podcasts because that's the way it is. So when I started the podcast, I said, okay, 30 minutes, that's it. But then I was talking about movies and not video games. So I had to refocus the podcast to, basically get it down to one video game. So I have like what I consider like a variety show. My podcast, I divided it up into segments. And the first is actually called Stick It. Why is the show a flat tire? Because that's me being angry at the world. So I have this audio bite when I'm, talking about what's annoying me. And so I can tell you where my next stick it's gonna come from. So anyway, I sit there and I complain about what's going wrong with my life. It's like a 2-minute segment, and then I hit a button that goes stupid. So that's just me complaining. That's it. Sometimes it's video game related, sometimes it's not. But I really enjoyed like collecting. I am not a video game collector. I am like collector adjacent. Like I know what the value of things are, and I recognize that they have that value, but I don't want those things. Like I think the most expensive item I have is Twilight Princess for the Wii U. It's like a $125 game. What? So I did this segment called Auction Alert, and I wrote a little intro song for that. It sounds like 9 Inch Nails. I'm quite proud of it. And I just sort of highlight auctions, but I highlight auctions on Shop Goodwill, not eBay. And has anyone ever bought anything from Shop Goodwill? It's like Goodwill's eBay. It is the worst website in the world. Thank you. It is like, here's a pile of wires and a disc. Buy it for $20. No. But then like some like really rare stuff will get up there that sort of slips through the cracks and gets donated. I don't know who donates this stuff. Like, oh, Johnny's video game collection, and and then like when I used to work for Goodwill, and we got a sealed copy of Pokemon Emerald. Sealed. I was like, who the hell donated a copy of Pokemon Emerald sealed? That sold for $4,000. And we were wondering, like, should we just get this thing graded now? Or should we just, like, let whoever buys it get it graded? I'm sure whoever bought it got it graded. So anyway, I'm going on a tangent. So I have this segment called Auction Alert where I look at video game auctions and I'm just kind of like, okay, this is stupid, this is, you know, what? Go ahead and listen to the podcast, and it's usually towards the end. Yeah, so then I do stupid. And then I started this new segment. It's called Between the Headphones. It came from my mother. My mother was a jazz archivist, and she wanted to write a biography, an autobiography, and she always said that the title would be Between the Headphones. So as a homage to my mother, I called my segment Between the Headphones. And it's where I, you know, talk with other content creators in the video game realm. And I did it because I'm actually interested in, you know, what other content creators are creating and their perspectives. But also I thought, okay, you know, if I get so-and-so on my podcast, my numbers are going to go up. You know, people are going to be like, ooh, he got so-and-so? I'm going to listen to that podcast. It's not how it works. There might be some like cross-promotion with whoever I interview. I mean, their listener base might be larger than mine, probably is. And I might get a couple listens out of it, but for the most part, I don't. I just had Adam Blank on my podcast. Adam Blank has, I don't think it's the #1 retro video game podcast, but it's up there. And he's a funny guy. He's a comedian from Canada. And I was talking about Paperboy for the NES. Anyone ever play Paperboy? Okay. Fun little game. But for some reason the NES version just works. Like the Genesis version sucks and the arcade version is whatever. Anyway, so I had this guy, Adam Blank, on, who's like got this #1 podcast. I thought, you know, that's it. You know, after this podcast, my numbers are gonna go through the roof. And nope. My numbers are still pretty paltry where they are, even though I'm highlighting other content creators. Now, I'm not gonna stop highlighting content creators because I do enjoy talking to other people, and once again, having a dialogue is a lot more interesting than me just sitting here talking about Castlevania. I found the floor meat on the 2nd level. It was pretty good. I mean, I try to keep it interesting, but I can only listen to myself for so much. So I just say, all right, when I go into my podcast, I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to stick to this game. Now, I don't have a big Patreon following, but I'm totally open to, like, if I had a Patreon say, hey, have you ever played Resident Evil? No. You should play Resident Evil. Okay. You know, I'll give anyone props. Like, yeah, so-and-so said I should play this game. Thanks for letting me, you know, ask me to play this game. So I've gotten down to the point where I just keep it specific to one game, segue into Auction Alert, and that's it. But if you're going to do a podcast, keep it specific to like video game joysticks, retro sports games that you like. You know, there's a list right here of just like ideas, but just keep it on that topic, because some podcasts are just all over the place. I've been guilty as charged when it comes to that. One thing I wish I had done, and this is another recommendation, record 5 episodes and get a feel for the process of recording a podcast, because the technical knowledge that you need, there is some, you know, figure out what microphones you need, what kind of settings they need, but record 5 episodes to kind of get a feel for the process. Don't publish them, but just record 5, because at the end of 5 episodes, you're gonna be like, okay, I tripped up here, the microphone sounded bad here, and we talked about basketball here. You know. So that's just kind of, you know, more of my advice. Be consistent. The biggest problem with any sort of content creation, especially a podcast, is that, okay, I'm gonna publish this podcast once a week. When I first started 2 Consoles Too Late, it was once a week. And then I stopped and I put it down for 2 months. And then I came back, like, oh, I'm back. Back to doing weekly, and then I put it down. in the world of podcasting, it's called pod fade. But I think with any sort of content creation, you've got to be consistent, because what you're doing is you're creating a relationship with a listener, a viewer, what have you. And once you establish that relationship and you just say, okay, I'm not going to publish a video for 3 weeks. You know what? Attention spans these days are very short. They're going to click over to be like, all right, well, he's not doing videos anymore. What's this guy doing? Oh, that's better. Hey, I wonder whether they come back and you get that capture. I don't know. So anyway, be consistent with any sort of content creation, because you are creating a relationship with a viewer or a listener, and it's a sort of a give and take. And it's one thing that personally that I really regret doing is putting down my podcast, because I generally enjoy doing my podcast. It's a fun hobby. I am a hobbyist podcaster. I talked to a podcast coach and she was like, you're a hobbyist, you're not making any money from it. I told her, I was like, I'd love to make money from it. She's like, I understand that, but to distinguish yourself in the podcasterverse, like, you can chase the algorithm. You hear that term, chasing the algorithm? Podcasts have a different algorithm than YouTube. So I did go into my podcast, change all my titles and everything to sort of get some more capture from just search engine, podcast search engines. Not just going into Google and saying retro video game podcast. If you do go into Google and type in retro video game podcast, I'm in the hunt because I optimize my search engine. That all being said though, and I always joke with my wife about this, if you're going to do any sort of content creation, podcast, YouTube, have fun. All right? I mean, I joke the best part is sitting down and playing the video game, discovering a new video game, researching the video game, learning something about it. That for me is the best part. Then comes the nitty gritty of, okay, I'm gonna have to sit down for 2 hours, talk about this video game, edit the podcast, put it up across 5 different platforms, and then promote it on social media. I'm not the best social media guy. I just joke. I wish I had a producer, and I always say to my wife, I'm like, you'd be the best producer in the world. All I have to do is just record, and you can just do all the internet stuff. She's like, no, I'm not doing that. She's like, if I'm gonna do that, I'm gonna do it for myself, not for you. So, but anyway, it's important to have fun. This is my little, what time is it? All right, I got a little bit of time. I think there's this big kind of question about what is the future of retro video games? And like I said at the beginning, give me a second. See, when I do a podcast, I have a stand. So the thing's right here, and I don't have to touch it. So I'm just what do I do with this microphone? So sorry. Anyway, the future of retro video games. Like I was saying, prices are going up. And one of the biggest questions, and then when people come onto my podcast, one of the questions I ask them is, what are your thoughts on physical versus digital media? And, it just goes either which way. I mean, when it comes to the retro video games, that's John Romero. Who's ever played Doom? Doom? Okay, that's the creator of Doom. He wrote a great book. It's an autobiography. Please check it out. It's called That Doom Guy. Great book. But he's all about game preservation. And all of his notes and stuff from when he was creating Doom, he had a flood in his house. And thankfully, all of his stuff, his notes and stuff from creating Doom were not destroyed. And they have been since donated to the Stromberg Museum. I am fortunate in Baltimore that we do have a lot of retro video game stores. These two gentlemen up front here know at least 2 of these, right? Yeah. We got, yeah. We have a lot of retro video game stores, so we have a lot of options. But some places aren't as lucky. They're just kind of beholden to Shop Goodwill and YouTube. But I'm not going to go out and open up a retro video game store anytime soon. It's just, once again, there's content out there about, it's just brick and mortar's dying. And it's not just video games, it's anything. I'm not going to open up a restaurant right now. I wouldn't open up a physical location for anything, especially video games. So when it comes to collecting, does anyone here have a room that looks like this? Like a big game room with like every copy?
I do.
All right. I don't, all right? Once again, I am not a collector. That's my collection. That pathetic little shelf on a Billy bookcase is my video game collection. See, I have a son, and that's my mother. I have a son, and I joke about on the podcast, but it's true. I'm gonna die. We're all gonna die. And when you die, you can't take the stuff with you. And I'm 45 years old, and if I did have a collection that looked like that, I'm gonna probably want to downsize my house, you know, move in this place a little bit smaller, and I'm not gonna have room for this kind of stuff. So what am I gonna do with it? I'll give it to my kids. This next generation does not want that. They're gonna be like, thanks, Dad, what am I supposed to do with all these video games? You know? Give them to Goodwill. Hopefully they're still worth something. I just don't think that, personally, that I think there's a bubble in retro video game collecting. I think it's gonna burst. Because eventually, we are all gonna, guys, girls, people our age, we're not gonna want these things. And I talked to one YouTuber, who's like, oh, I'm gonna create a museum. Well, that's cool and all, but how many video game museums can we have? I mean, you know, one in New York, one in Maryland, I get that, but that just doesn't seem realistic. So when I look at video games, retro video games especially, like the astounding prices and just how cutthroat it's all becoming, I just sort of taking a step back and just being like, I don't think this is, you know, gonna last, but that's just me. So anyway, I'm tired of talking. So I got 5 people here. Do we have 5 questions? Anything. My favorite food, my favorite color. But you gotta come up here because I can hear you now.
Yeah, they're running over.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. Favorite console? Oh. Wow, that's a tough one. Right now, I would say right now I like the SNES, but I really like the PlayStation. It's got a great library. I just got a Dreamcast, and I can see why it's got this weird cult following. Very limited, you know, experience with that. I do have a grudge against Microsoft and anything Xbox. I can't do it because after working at Goodwill, like the original Xbox was like huge. Then they came out the 360, which is just heavy, and then it didn't work because it got Red Ring of Death. Then they're like, oh, we'll do Xbox One, and it made it the size of a VCR. It's like, all right, Microsoft, you had 3 chances. So I had a 360S for like 2 weeks, literally. I was like, and I played Halo 3. I was like, I can't do this, and I got rid of it. So, favorite SNES just because of childhood, but a weird grudge is Xbox 360. So, thank you. Good question. Anyone?
What are your thoughts on
Nintendo, the direction that they're going in. So I joke on the podcast when Switch 2 was, you know, we didn't have a lot of details about Switch 2. I used to call it Bob. We now know it's called Switch 2, but I still call it Bob. Switch 2 is a defining moment in Nintendo that I think a lot of people it was going to happen eventually, you know, that we're seeing games that probably normally wouldn't have been on Nintendo are coming to Switch 2. And that's good and bad, you know, like, okay, I want to play Elden Ring. Up until a couple months ago, I didn't have a PS4, and I didn't have a way to play it, but, you know, with Switch 2, I could possibly play it. The fact that Mario Kart World is $90, everyone, it's just, that's the way this thing's going down. You can call it inflation, you can call it tariffs, or what you want. But I don't think Nintendo's ever going to get away from the core of quote-unquote family-friendly, safe almost. But I think after Switch 2, you're going to see a definitive shift. Like the Wii U was a huge flop, and it was just kind of the hiccup before Switch. I don't think the Switch 2 is going to be a failure. But, you know, if I had that crystal ball, I'd be rich. So, thank you. Good question. You guys got anything? It's cool. All right, well, I'm going to wrap up early then. The postcards, grab a postcard. If you want a magnet, I've got the Miracle of Save States magnets. Thank you for listening. Have fun, stay safe. And as always, have a good one. I love you, and goodbye. So if you head on over to the YouTube at Two Consoles Too Late, I actually posted a video of my panel. I shot the video using my GoPro, solely just to get the audio, but it kind of came in handy because it really adds a lot of context to what was going on during my panel. Because in the background, behind the curtain, you can see the masquerade rehearsal happening and the people dancing to the techno music during my panel. So check that out over at YouTube. And to thy Geekdom Con, I am not saying thank you, all right? Need you to figure out what a room is, okay? It's not a space divided by a curtain. So before I end the podcast, I did want to do an auction alert because 4 SNES games went off on a certain website that is not Shop Goodwill, and they went for a pretty penny.
Auction, 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 auction. Alert.
All right, this auction is coming not from the Shop Goodwills. It's coming from ctbids.com. This is a website I was talking about in a previous podcast, and it's turned out to be a serious hidey hole of video games. This is the site where I got my Sega Dreamcast, my Sega Sports Edition Dreamcast, for a nice price. So they do have a category of video games, and every once in a while I sort of check it. And it's normally like an old Nintendo, an old Sega Genesis, some video games, and the video games themselves aren't anything that blow your hair back. But this one auction from Ashland, Virginia, wow, it's just, how did this happen? Super Nintendo games, Chrono Trigger, Soul Blazer, a game I've talked about here on the podcast, Final Fantasy, I think it's Final Fantasy 2, and Earthbound. Yes, Earthbound. A highly sought SNES cartridge. Chrono Trigger. I just talked about that game. That cartridge loose goes for like $250. So here we have 4 SNES cartridges. They are genuine. The pictures are really nice. And the nice thing about CT Bids is you can sort of click over the pictures and you get this like magnifier that really shows the detail. And you can see that these are genuine cartridges. These are not fakes. And these 4 cartridges sold on May 22nd for $720. Now, you have to realize that there's a buyer's premium added on to these auctions at ctbids.com. So the buyer's premium was 15%. So let's hear. Let's do some Jackson math here. What is 15% of $720? That's $100. So it went for $720, plus there was a buyer's premium of another $100. So if you're ever going to bid on anything on TT Bids, you have to take in that buyer's premium into account. And if you do win the auction, they zap your credit card right away. You don't go in and pay like you would with like eBay or Shop Goodwill. No. They zap you right from the get-go. So just be aware of that. But to see these 4 games, genuine copies of these games, and to find them in such a hidey hole like this was a little surprising. So big collector's tip here at the podcast. If you're looking for some of those rare games, check out ctbids.com. All right. Thank you for listening to the podcast. I have been the host, Jackson Keebler. You can go to the interwebs and just type in 2 consoles too late, and there I will be. It is Memorial Day, so if you are celebrating, please be safe. But as always, have a good one. I love you, and goodbye. And the reason don't do that. Yeah, I don't know how that just happened.